Hello friends, KillerBee here. Today we're out doing a little bit of railroad archaeology. Head straight north out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, up Highway 141, and shortly you will pass the communities of Stiles and Stiles Junction on your left. You might not take notice, as not much remains of either today. The same can be said for the railroads there. Once their tracks crisscrossed the area. Today, some still remain, but for the others, just traces, if one knows where to look. Let's go exploring and see what we can find. First, a little history. In 1881, the Wisconsin and Michigan Railroad started building northward from Fort Howard, a community that is now part of Green Bay. They almost got to Stiles before pausing for winter. In 1882, they built through Stiles and continued northward. At about the same time, the lofty-sounding St. Paul Eastern Grand Trunk Railway was building westward from Oconto and crossed the Wisconsin and Michigan about 2 miles north of Stiles at what was once called Leithton, then Stiles Junction. Its intention was to connect St. Paul with Oconto, where freight seeking an eastern market would be transloaded onto ships, making Oconto a great port like Milwaukee or Chicago. In 1884, the Milwaukee, Lakeshore, and Western took over the management of it. 2 branches would be built circa 1889. The more aptly named Oconto and Southwestern would construct from a point 2 miles south of Stiles, called Oconto Junction, east to Oconto, and the St. Paul Eastern Grand Trunk Railway would build from Stiles Junction down to Stiles to service a mill on the south side of the Oconto River. Through consolidation, eventually the rail lines ended up being either Chicago and Northwestern, or Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific, known as the Milwaukee Road. The map stayed static until the early 1930s. In 1932, the line from Stiles Junction to Stiles was abandoned, and in 1933, Oconto Junction to Oconto was abandoned due to a bridge issue. The Milwaukee Road still ran to Oconto, however, as they obtained trackage rights over the Northwestern from Stiles Junction. Fast forward to 1980. With the Milwaukee Road in bankruptcy, the Escanaba and Lake Superior purchased the line. The Northwestern sold the portion from Stiles Junction to Oconto Falls to the ELS in 1995, having abandoned west of Oconto Falls just after World War II. In 1996, the portion from Stiles Junction to Oconto would be abandoned, giving us the map as it exists today. So, what remains of these lines? We'll start at Oconto Junction. Our reference is the crossing of East Stiles Tower Road, although none of the maps that I have show the road there when the track to Oconto was still in place. Even the USGS topographical map has the right-of-way fade out just before the crossing, leaving us to extrapolate. But using the timetable mileage from Stiles Junction placed the junction point south of today's road crossing. A quick look around from there doesn't indicate there was ever anything here, probably in part due to the disruption of the area that would have accompanied the power line installation. But we need to look closer. A nice aside, the old ties lying by the road crossing show the Milwaukee Road's tie clock dating method, where instead of date nails, the tie's year is indicated by impressions in the tie, representing the hands of a clock which correlate to its year. But back to our mission. Greg Bunce provided a drawing of the depot, which was of a standard design. A news article reports it completely burning in 1902, and I am not sure if it was rebuilt or not. The track chart shows the line from Oconto swinging alongside the main line and paralleling it for a little ways. Walking south of the crossing a little ways and then facing north towards it, it is apparent that there is some fill that would correlate with where the switch and track should have been. It gets wider, then eventually breaks off, and is its own separate fill and right-of-way. Here we are standing on the fill for the Oconto line right-of-way and see the gap between it and the main line. And walking back toward the road, there are traces of ties in the ground, or at least what my imagination makes them out to be. And there's these things. Heading north of the crossing, up to where the Y came in, we see the old right-of-way of the north leg. And closer to where it came into the main, we see evidence of the fill that the track sat on. Moving 2 miles up the line, we come to the community of Stiles. Researching Stiles was a little tricky, as in Oconto County is also the town of Stiles, a county subdivision. And Stiles and Stiles Junction seem to be used interchangeably sometimes in old news articles. The community of Stiles has had a roller coaster history. In the 1850s, it was a booming lumber town. Anson Eldred was the mill's owner, and he also owned pretty much most of the community. Stiles was named for his son, but Anson began expanding elsewhere, and by the 1870s had a number of other operations, and the Stiles mill began to get neglected. By 1881, the settlement was reported to be almost a ghost town. Then, with the coming of the railroad and reestablishment of the mill, the area boomed again. Other businesses located. Disaster was averted when a contingent from Oconto went to call on the railroad officials to try to persuade them to build the line through Oconto instead. Luckily for Stiles, they did not prevail. The mill ran until 1910, with the planing mill and yards closing a few years later. A pulp mill still operated, but in 1924 it burned, and after that the town began to recede again, as that was really the last industry there. More fires in 1927 and 1932 burned more buildings. The depot was built in 1882. A newspaper article from the time mentions a turntable, but I could find no evidence of one. Here we see the valuation map, probably from the 1915 to 1920 time frame, showing the community of Stiles and its depot. North is to the top. Many times subdivisions are plotted out and appear on maps, even though they haven't been built yet, and that appears to be the case here. A 1912 map also shows this, plus the depot. The current Highway I crossing was yet to be built, but it would come through and cross the track like this. As it heads north, the track crosses the Oconto River, then maintains its elevation on a small fill. Looking at Google Earth, you can see the edge of the fill where it widened to accommodate the depot and the side track. Then north of Highway I, it comes back in again. And here is what it looks like today, looking north. The depot should have been in the foreground. On the left, you can see the terrain sloping down. It actually becomes a separate fill, as can be seen here. Standing at Highway I looking north, you can see the two fills again as they start to come together. Also a phone pole at the left. The CNW spur crossed the Oconto River to serve the mill. Looking for traces of it on the north side of the river, I thought I detected a fill for a little ways in the woods to the left of the road, about where the track should have been. Interestingly, the Milwaukee Road Val map shows a connection. Now let's head the 1.5 miles up to Stiles Junction, where the CNW crossed. In the northwest corner of the crossing had sat the depot. There was a little controversy in 1932 when the Milwaukee Road closed it without first securing permission from the Public Service Commission. The required public hearings were held after the fact. In 1964, we see a westbound C&W train just clearing the diamond, and a shot of a ELS southbound going by it in 2000. When the C&W was still crossing the Milwaukee Road, signals guarded the crossing. It was an automatic interlocking, which meant first come, first served. Whichever train hit the circuit first got the signal first. One signal still stands, the former Milwaukee Road signal for northbound trains. Bases are still in place for two other routes, the C&W eastbound and the Milwaukee Road southbound, seen here with the edge of the platform still remaining too. Also, the electrical boxes at the diamond site are still in place. The remnant of a structure alongside the Y is a mystery to me, as it does not appear on any drawings. The C&W spur to Stiles is still apparent, but not from the track. It appears some ditching was done, and the old roadbed plowed up, because we should see it right about here on the right. But if you go a little ways into the woods, you can see the old roadbed on a small fill for a short distance. The old C&W rail that would have been right at the depot looked awfully small. I couldn't read the stampings anymore due to all the scaling built up, but my old C&W track chart does show it as a small section of 72-pound rail from 1907, contrasted to the Milwaukee Road rail. The C&W valuation map from 1917 has an interesting notation. At the connection track, it appears that it says, "Trains must not pass this point." Or maybe that is what I want to think it says. But there is also this notation, C&W Railway Pilots Agreement with ICC, 5/26/1916, and an arrow pointing to the C&W property line on the Y. I could not find anything on this, but I am just guessing that there must have been some restriction prohibiting C&W from going any further around the connecting track than their property line. Walking around the area and soaking in the history and searching for remnants was fun, but also melancholy. It was a little weird, like being in another world, but with a portal out. Another activity that's both fun and melancholy at the same time is comparing then and now. There is a lot of history in this area. I went down the rabbit hole on some Facebook group pages, one called the Stiles Area History and one called Oconto History. Both were great sources of old newspaper articles and pictures, many used here with permission. Besides the group pages, I also thank the Sioux Line Historical and Technical Society for the use of Larry Easton's photo, Mel Finzer for Roger Puta's photo, Greg Bunce for the depot drawings, and Randy Stachinsky for one of his images. One contradiction arose. A newspaper article in November of 1918 stated that the station formerly called Oconto Junction had been changed to Stiles Junction. Yet, an 1896 railroad map of Wisconsin shows the points already carrying those names they allegedly switched to in 1918. Well, I hope you found this all interesting. It was fun to research, both online and in person, but frustrating to have to parse it down. More videos are coming, so you can subscribe here and also link to others. Thank you. Bye for now.